I'm Samuel Duffy, 44 years old, founder and CEO of Duffy Manufacturing Inc., a company I started from the ground up 15 years ago in a small rented workshop. Today, that business is valued at $3.2 million, a result of relentless effort, strategic planning, and meticulous management. Over the years, I built this company not just as a source of income, but as a legacy, something tangible that represents my father's vision and my own dedication. From product development to securing contracts with key clients, every decision was calculated and documented. I've always been known for my methodical approach. In business, details matter, and I keep an exhaustive archive of everything, from corporate bylaws and shareholder agreements to board meeting minutes and financial statements. This documentation isn't just paperwork. It's the backbone of how I maintain control and ensure transparency in operations. Over the years, whenever any question or challenge arose, I could pull the exact file or signed memo that clarified my position. This habit of thorough record-keeping has been critical, especially when family dynamics started to complicate what should have been straightforward succession plans. The day of my father's will reading should have been a solemn moment of closure and clarity. Instead, it quickly became a battlefield. As the room gathered in the lawyer's office, filled with relatives and a few close family friends, I was prepared to listen quietly, respectful of the process. The lawyer, David Carlisle, began by reviewing the will in detail. Then came the moment that caught me off guard. My sister, Rachel, confident and assertive, stood up and declared, "The house and business are mine. He just gets the garage tools." The room chuckled nervously, some surprised by her brazenness, others exchanging uneasy glances. I sat still, my face neutral, but inside I was calculating every angle. Her statement was bold, but I knew it was based on a misconception, a dangerous assumption that ignored the legal reality. I quietly responded with a calm, "I see." Externally, it was a minimal reaction, but internally, my mind raced through the legal documents I had carefully maintained over the years. I mentally began to cross-reference the property deeds, corporate shares, trust amendments, and the final will, all of which clearly contradicted Rachel's assertion. Those papers were not just ink on paper. They were legal instruments that defined ownership and control, areas where she had no legitimate claim. This moment marked the beginning of a calculated response. Rather than reacting emotionally or engaging in a direct confrontation, I chose a strategic path. I knew that any impulsive behavior could undermine my position. Instead, I relied on the strength of documentation and the support of our family lawyer, David Carlisle, who understood the importance of adhering strictly to the law and the final testament of my father. The situation was delicate. Rachel's public declaration had set the tone for what could become a contentious dispute, but I was committed to resolving this within professional and legal frameworks. I consciously began to prepare myself for a process that would require patience, precision, and unwavering focus on facts. My goal was clear: to protect the company that represented years of hard work and to uphold the rightful inheritance my father intended for me based on undisputed legal evidence. That day I learned how quickly family ties could be tested when vast assets were at stake. I also reaffirmed my belief in the power of thorough preparation and calm professionalism. My approach would not only safeguard my interests, but also demonstrate the importance of structure and legal clarity in family business succession. As the initial shock faded, I sat back, composed, ready to engage the necessary legal steps and documentation review that would follow, steps I had anticipated but hoped never to undertake. Over the span of 15 years, I transformed Duffy Manufacturing from a modest workshop into a significant player in the manufacturing sector, currently generating approximately $7.5 million in annual revenue. This growth was far from accidental. It reflected strategic foresight, disciplined execution, and meticulous attention to detail in every operational aspect. From early on, I recognized that success would not come from chance, but through deliberate planning and comprehensive record-keeping. Every contract signed, every capital improvement made, and every corporate decision was documented and archived with precision. At inception, Duffy Manufacturing was just an idea coupled with a rented workspace and a handful of tools. I personally invested not only financial resources, but also countless hours managing product development cycles, vendor relationships, and customer acquisition efforts. Over time, the company expanded its product line, diversifying into several specialized manufacturing niches, which helped secure contracts with major clients across multiple industries. These clients valued reliability, quality control, and consistency, standards I enforced rigorously through internal audits and comprehensive reporting systems. Key to the company's structure was the incorporation process I oversaw meticulously. I filed the necessary documents to establish Duffy Manufacturing as a legal entity, ensuring compliance with all state and federal regulations. I maintained 85% of the company's shares personally, while a minority stake was held by an outside investor who provided strategic input but had no operational control. This ownership allocation was reflected in detailed shareholder agreements, which outlined voting rights, transfer restrictions, and dispute resolution mechanisms. These documents were updated regularly and stored securely, both physically in our corporate office safe and digitally on encrypted servers with redundant backups. Capital improvements totaling over $1.1 million were funded from my personal savings and reinvested profits. These investments included upgrading manufacturing equipment, enhancing production workflows, and expanding our facility to meet growing demand. Each capital expenditure was documented with invoices, contracts, and board resolutions authorizing the expenditures. This level of documentation ensured transparency and accountability, essential for maintaining trust among shareholders and stakeholders. Beyond financial and operational records, I maintained rigorous minutes of every board meeting and major management discussion. These minutes captured decisions on company direction, personnel changes, and responses to market challenges. The practice of documenting even informal discussions helped build a comprehensive narrative, demonstrating my leadership and strategic decisions over the years. The family home, valued at $950,000, was also part of the inheritance puzzle. Although jointly deeded to both my father and me, legal instruments included a right of survivorship favoring me, effectively transferring ownership upon my father's passing. This nuance was captured in property deeds, title insurance documents, and trust amendments, all carefully catalogued and frequently reviewed to prevent any ambiguity. Such comprehensive documentation was more than administrative diligence. It was a strategic safeguard. When interpersonal dynamics became strained within the family, these records became the definitive source of truth. They empowered me to control the narrative and provided the legal foundation necessary to defend my rightful ownership and leadership of the business. In hindsight, my commitment to meticulous record-keeping and legal compliance was not only fundamental to the company's growth, but also critical in preparing me for the unexpected challenges that surfaced during the will reading. While Rachel publicly proclaimed an entitlement to the company and home, I knew that the weight of evidence rested firmly on my side, built over years of disciplined management and documented governance. This professional foundation gave me confidence that despite the emotional turmoil, the path forward was clear. Rely on facts, legal instruments, and strategic counsel rather than reactions or assumptions. The business wasn't just my livelihood. It was a legacy meticulously documented and protected, ready to withstand any challenge that might arise from family disputes. Rachel Duffy, my sister, was 39 at the time, an age where life's pressures had clearly begun to shape her decisions in ways I hadn't fully anticipated. From the outset, I understood her motivation wasn't purely greed, but a complex mix of resentment and mounting financial desperation. Over the years, Rachel had struggled with unstable employment and escalating debts, which steadily eroded her confidence and deepened her frustration toward the family legacy she felt excluded from. This personal context explained her boldness during the will reading, but did not justify the legal inaccuracies she asserted. Rachel's claim that she owned both the family home and the business was grounded in a flawed understanding of our father's estate plans, heavily influenced by outdated verbal comments and an early, superseded draft of the will. She seemed to hold on to selective memories of conversations where Dad had expressed goodwill toward her or hinted at possible future arrangements, but these were informal and never translated into binding legal documents. More critically, those early drafts had been revised multiple times, reflecting our father's deliberate decisions to clarify asset distribution as his circumstances changed. Unfortunately, Rachel appeared unaware or unwilling to acknowledge how these revisions nullified any prior versions. This oversight was pivotal. The final will, legally executed and notarized months before Dad's passing, clearly designated the ownership of Duffy Manufacturing and the family home. The business shares were explicitly bequeathed to me, while the home's title was held jointly with a right of survivorship, favoring me, ensuring automatic transfer of ownership upon his death. These details weren't just legal formalities, they were the product of careful estate planning, designed to prevent exactly the kind of dispute Rachel was initiating. Beyond the will, our family lawyer, David Carlisle, had been instrumental in guiding Dad through multiple estate updates, ensuring all decisions were properly documented and compliant with state laws. David had also emphasized the importance of shareholder agreements within the company, which included mechanisms protecting majority owners, like myself, from hostile takeovers or unsubstantiated claims. Rachel's neglect of these binding agreements underscored a critical gap in her understanding of corporate governance and property law. Rachel's financial desperation seemed to have clouded her grasp of these legal realities. She appeared to believe that asserting ownership loudly and confidently at the will reading would somehow translate into entitlement. Her plan seemed to rely heavily on the assumption that ambiguity or family sympathy might override documented fact. This was a gamble, one that underestimated the strength of the legal framework I had maintained and the professional counsel available. I also noted that Rachel had not sought legal advice prior to the reading, nor did she present any formal documentation supporting her claims. Instead, she relied on emotional appeals and anecdotal evidence, both inadequate in the face of a meticulously executed estate plan. David Carlisle, as a neutral and experienced family lawyer, was prepared to clarify these points during the reading, emphasizing the validity and finality of the documented will and corporate titles. His presence reaffirmed the legal robustness backing my position. Her assertion at the reading was in effect a bluff. I recognized that this was not just a family dispute, but a calculated attempt to leverage misinformation and emotional pressure for financial relief. This realization reinforced the necessity of a measured, evidence-based response. Rachel's misinterpretation of the legal documents was a critical weakness. Her claim was vulnerable to a systematic dismantling through proper verification of all estate and corporate records. In essence, Rachel's behavior highlighted a common pitfall in family business succession: the tension between personal expectations and legal realities. Her failure to appreciate the importance of updated estate documentation and shareholder agreements put her on shaky ground. Meanwhile, my years of strategic planning and rigorous documentation served as the foundation for an objective, legally defensible position, one that I was prepared to assert decisively. This stage of the conflict was crucial. Understanding Rachel's motivations and pinpointing her critical oversight provided clarity on how to proceed. Rather than engaging in personal confrontation or emotional rebuttal, the situation demanded a systematic approach focused on legal facts and professional standards. I resolved to work closely with David Carlisle to gather all relevant documents, verify ownership status, and prepare for the inevitable legal challenge ahead. As I observed Rachel's confident but misguided claim, I remained outwardly calm, knowing that beneath her bravado lay a fundamental misunderstanding of the legal instruments governing our family assets. This insight shaped my next steps: comprehensive document review, strategic coordination with legal counsel, and preparation for a methodical defense. The goal was to protect not just the company and property, but the integrity of the estate planning process that my father had entrusted to us. Ultimately, Rachel's flawed claim served to reinforce the critical importance of thorough, updated legal documentation in family business succession. Her failure to grasp this would be the opening I needed to uphold rightful ownership and ensure the company's stability moving forward. After Rachel's bold declaration at the will reading, I immediately turned my attention to the core legal documents that defined ownership of both the company and the family home. This was no time for reactionary responses. I needed to methodically review every piece of relevant paperwork to confirm the factual basis of my position and identify where Rachel's claim faltered. The first document I examined was the final version of my father's will. Unlike the outdated drafts Rachel apparently relied upon, this will was the legally binding testament, signed and notarized 6 months before Dad's passing. As I read the relevant clauses, it was clear. 100% of the shares of Duffy Manufacturing Inc. were explicitly bequeathed to me. There was no ambiguity, no division or shared ownership mentioned. The language was precise, leaving no room for misinterpretation about control of the company. Next, I reviewed the trust documents associated with the estate. These were critical, because my father had established a trust to manage certain assets during his lifetime and to facilitate smooth transfer upon his death. Within these trust amendments, it was reiterated that the business shares were to be held solely by me, with clear instructions preventing any transfer or division without my consent. The trust also detailed how the family home was to be treated, a point I knew was central to Rachel's claim. Regarding the family home, valued at approximately $950,000, I pulled the property deeds from our secure archive. The deed showed joint ownership between my father and me, but crucially, it included a right of survivorship clause in my favor. This meant that upon my father's passing, ownership of the property automatically transferred to me, circumventing any probate claims or disputes. Rachel's assertion that the house was hers ignored this legal nuance. The deed was current, registered with the county recorder's office, and backed by title insurance policies, all of which I confirmed were in order and unchallenged. I also revisited the incorporation documents of Duffy Manufacturing. As the founder and majority shareholder, I had ensured that every step, from articles of incorporation to shareholder agreements, was meticulously recorded and updated. This included stock certificates showing my ownership of 85% of shares, with the remaining 15% held by a passive, unrelated investor. The shareholder agreement contained protective provisions, restrictions on unauthorized share transfers, clauses preventing hostile takeovers, and detailed voting rights that clearly gave me operational control. Importantly, the corporate filings I reviewed included minutes from recent board meetings, which documented unanimous recognition of my position as CEO and majority shareholder. These minutes also recorded discussions about succession planning and reaffirmed the company's internal governance structures. None of these documents supported Rachel's claim of ownership or operational authority within the company. Cross-referencing all this, it became evident that Rachel's entire argument was based on a revoked will draft and informal conversations our father had with her years ago, verbal statements that were never codified in any legal instrument. While family discussions can be meaningful personally, they hold no weight in the face of legally binding documents. This was a crucial distinction that Rachel either misunderstood or intentionally disregarded. Furthermore, I reviewed the breach of fiduciary clauses embedded in our shareholder agreement. These clauses protected minority shareholders and the company itself from any attempts to claim ownership through illegitimate means or without proper authorization. If Rachel tried to assert control without legal standing, these contractual safeguards would be enforceable in court. To confirm my assessment, I reached out to the corporate secretary to verify all stock ownership records and property filings officially. The secretary corroborated that all filings were current, accurate, and reflected the ownership structure as documented. Additionally, I gathered notarized affidavits from senior company executives who had worked alongside me for years. These executives could attest to my leadership, ownership, and the clear absence of any legitimate claim by Rachel. It was now clear that the legal landscape was firmly on my side. Rachel's claim relied on outdated and revoked documents and informal family talks that could not override the explicit final will, corporate governance documents, or property rights. My analysis identified multiple leverage points to counter her assertions, from presenting the final will and trust documents to relying on shareholder agreements and property deeds. This thorough review shaped my strategic approach. Rather than engaging in confrontations fueled by emotions, I would focus on assembling an airtight case rooted in official, incontrovertible documentation. The facts were on my side, but I understood that claims like Rachel's, even if baseless, could cause uncertainty and discord. It was critical to maintain professionalism, coordinate with our family lawyer David Carlisle, and prepare to systematically dismantle her assertions through the legal processes ahead. In this phase, the strength of meticulous preparation and comprehensive documentation became invaluable. The evidence I compiled provided not just a defense, but the foundation for asserting my rights confidently and unequivocally. Rachel's misplaced confidence was her critical oversight. She had underestimated how extensively the company's and estate's legal frameworks protected my interests. The path forward required careful orchestration, compiling evidence, verifying all filings, and anticipating potential challenges. This review was the necessary first step in a deliberate course of action designed to uphold the integrity of our father's final wishes and the future stability of Duffy Manufacturing. With this comprehensive understanding, I was ready to take the professional and legal steps necessary to address Rachel's claims systematically and preserve what decades of hard work and careful planning had built. Immediately after completing my thorough review of the will, trust documents, property deeds, and corporate filings, I recognized the necessity of transitioning from analysis to action. I scheduled an urgent meeting with our family lawyer, David Carlisle. His role was pivotal, not only to validate the documentation I had assembled, but to strategize a comprehensive, legally sound response to Rachel's unfounded claims. Given the gravity of the situation, this meeting needed to be both detailed and disciplined, ensuring that every piece of evidence was organized, authenticated, and sequenced chronologically to establish an irrefutable timeline of ownership and intent. Upon meeting David, I presented the entire portfolio of documents I had gathered. This included the final notarized will, all trust amendments reflecting the designated distribution of assets, incorporation papers, shareholder agreements, property deeds with the right of survivorship clause, stock certificates, and minutes from board meetings over the past several years. We methodically reviewed each document's provenance, ensuring there were no gaps or inconsistencies that Rachel's legal team could exploit. David emphasized the importance of cataloging this evidence in a manner that the probate court and any future legal proceedings could easily digest. We agreed to create a comprehensive evidence inventory, indexing every document by date, type, and relevance. This inventory would serve as a guide for presenting the facts systematically, preventing any ambiguity about ownership or intent. Furthermore, we discussed the necessity of cross-referencing corporate records with property titles to demonstrate a consistent, unified ownership structure across all assets in question. Recognizing that stock ownership records and shareholder agreements were central to the dispute, I coordinated with our corporate secretary to verify and certify the current share registry. The secretary provided updated documents confirming my 85% ownership stake and the identity of the minority shareholder uninvolved in this familial dispute. We obtained official certifications and affidavits verifying these records were accurate and reflected the present legal standing of the company. These certifications were critical to preempt any claims of unauthorized share transfers or informal ownership changes that Rachel might allege. Parallel to document organization, David and I arranged to secure multiple backups of all files. Physical copies were duplicated, bound, and indexed for courtroom presentation, while digital files were encrypted and stored on secure servers with redundant backups. This dual approach ensured that no evidence could be lost, tampered with, or called into question due to procedural errors. Maintaining a secure chain of custody for all documents was a priority. To strengthen our position further, I reached out to several long-term executives and senior management personnel within Duffy Manufacturing. They had witnessed my leadership tenure and were familiar with the company's governance and ownership structure. I requested notarized statements from these individuals, attesting to my role as founder, CEO, and majority shareholder, and affirming their understanding that Rachel held no legitimate operational or ownership authority. These affidavits would provide credible third-party corroboration of the documented facts and counter any emotional or anecdotal claims Rachel might present. David and I also reviewed the shareholder agreement's breach of fiduciary and anti-takeover clauses in detail. We outlined how these provisions legally barred any unauthorized attempts by Rachel to assert control or ownership without due process. We plan to incorporate these legal protections explicitly in our forthcoming court filings and correspondence with Rachel to demonstrate the strength of the company's governance framework. The meeting concluded with a clear action plan: complete the evidence inventory, finalize the affidavits, secure official certifications of ownership, and prepare a formal written response to be submitted to the probate court contesting Rachel's claims. David stressed the importance of a calm, professional demeanor throughout the process. Any hint of emotional reaction could be leveraged against me in court or media. Our strategy was to let the weight of documented facts and legal authority dismantle Rachel's position. Throughout this process, I remained focused on maintaining professionalism and strategic patience. The stakes were high, but so was the quality of the evidence. I was confident that a methodical, legally rigorous approach would not only protect the company and property, but also preserve the integrity of my father's final wishes. By coordinating closely with legal counsel, corporate officers, and trusted witnesses, I was building a fortress of documentation and testimony poised to withstand any challenge. This phase was about control of information, perception, and legal procedure. Rachel had initiated a bold claim, but with every document catalogued, every witness statement sworn, and every legal safeguard confirmed, the reality of ownership and authority became increasingly clear. I was not reacting to a family dispute. I was orchestrating a professional defense of legacy and enterprise, leveraging every available tool and relationship to secure the rightful outcome. As this groundwork solidified, I prepared mentally and logistically for the next steps: formal legal challenges, public communications with stakeholders, and the inevitable court proceedings. The meeting with David Carlisle was a critical juncture that transformed initial disbelief into decisive action, setting the foundation for a systematic and comprehensive rebuttal to Rachel's claims. Once David Carlisle and I sat down to meticulously review the extensive documentation I had assembled, it became immediately clear that Rachel's claim had no legal merit. David, with his years of experience in estate and corporate law, approached the evidence with a critical eye, confirming what I had already deduced. The law, as supported by the final properly executed documents, unequivocally favored my position. The first document on the table was the final will, signed and notarized 6 months before our father's passing. David pointed out the precision in the language used: no vague terms, no ambiguities. The will explicitly bequeathed 100% of the shares of Duffy Manufacturing Inc. to me. This wasn't an informal statement or a rough draft. It was a legally binding document, drafted and executed with due attention to statutory requirements. The execution date and notarization details left no room for challenge, and the witness signatures further solidified its legitimacy. David noted that any previous versions or drafts Rachel might reference were superseded and revoked by this final testament, rendering them legally void. Next, we examined the trust documents associated with my father's estate. These documents had been amended multiple times over the years, reflecting changing circumstances and clarifications on asset distribution. The trust clearly reinforced the will's directives, confirming that the entirety of Duffy Manufacturing's shares were assigned to me alone, with explicit instructions prohibiting any transfer or division without my express consent. David underscored the strength of these trust provisions, as they are typically designed to ensure smooth asset transitions and avoid probate complications, which aligned perfectly with my father's intent for his legacy. Moreover, the trust included detailed provisions on the family home, which was a critical point of contention. Pulling the property deeds from our secured archives, we reviewed the legal instruments for the family home, valued at approximately $950,000. The deed indicated joint ownership between my father and me, but crucially, it included a right of survivorship clause favoring me. This meant that upon my father's passing, ownership of the property automatically transferred to me, bypassing probate and any competing claims. David highlighted how this legal mechanism is often employed to prevent disputes and was a strong defense against Rachel's assertions. The deed was properly filed with the county recorder's office, accompanied by a current title insurance policy, fully ensuring clear title in my favor. Every document was current, correctly executed, and in good standing. Turning to the corporate side of the matter, we reviewed the incorporation documents and shareholder agreements of Duffy Manufacturing. As founder and majority shareholder, my ownership stake of 85% was documented through stock certificates, shareholder ledgers, and filings with the Secretary of State. The remaining 15% was held by an unrelated, passive investor. The shareholder agreement contained robust protective clauses, restrictions on unauthorized share transfers, provisions preventing hostile takeovers, and defined voting rights that clearly established my control as CEO and majority owner. David emphasized how these corporate governance structures were legally binding and supported by state corporate law, effectively insulating the company from unfounded ownership claims. We also examined minutes from recent board meetings, which recorded unanimous recognition of my leadership and ownership. Not only did these minutes reflect operational decisions and company direction, but they also documented formal discussions on succession planning and confirmed that no other party, including Rachel, had any executive authority or claim to shares. These records were important as they demonstrated consistent and uncontested corporate governance over years. Cross-referencing all this evidence, it became evident that Rachel's claims were based on a revoked will draft and informal family conversations. While personal memories and verbal assurances may have emotional weight, they carry no legal standing against well-executed documents. David reminded me that courts prioritize the latest valid testamentary documents and formalized corporate agreements over hearsay or informal assertions. Additionally, the shareholder agreement contained breach of fiduciary clauses designed to protect the company and minority shareholders from illegitimate claims or attempts to disrupt corporate control. David explained that if Rachel persisted in asserting control without legal basis, these clauses could be invoked to uphold the company's governance integrity. To corroborate these findings, I had previously coordinated with the corporate secretary to verify and certify the accuracy of all stock ownership records. The secretary provided official certifications and affidavits confirming that the ownership structure reflected my majority stake and that no unauthorized transfers had occurred. This certification was critical to preempt any claims Rachel might make regarding supposed informal share allotments or transfers. Further fortifying our position, I had arranged for notarized affidavits from senior executives and long-standing company employees who could attest to my leadership and ownership and affirm that Rachel had never exercised any operational control or held shares. These third-party attestations added credibility beyond the written documents, reinforcing the factual narrative for any court or administrative review. After completing this exhaustive legal review, David and I concurred. Rachel's claims were baseless under current law and lacked any substantive documentary support. The final will, trust provisions, property deeds, incorporation documents, shareholder agreements, and corporate governance records collectively formed an airtight case. With professional and legal clarity, we had multiple leverage points to counter her assertions decisively, ensuring the integrity of the company's ownership and the rightful execution of my father's testamentary wishes. Our next step would be to formalize this position in a written response to the probate court, explicitly citing each document and legal principle to dismantle Rachel's claims systematically. David stressed that our response needed to be precise, citing statutory references, fiduciary duties, and breach clauses, leaving no room for misinterpretation. The documentation wasn't just supportive evidence, it was the backbone of our legal defense, and its detailed presentation would be crucial in the forthcoming proceedings. This confirmation from David brought a sense of professional reassurance. Despite the emotional weight of the family dispute, the law was clear, and the documents I had maintained over years provided the foundation to uphold rightful ownership. The path ahead demanded patience and rigor, but the strength of our evidence positioned us well to proceed confidently. With the legal facts verified, I began preparing to move beyond analysis toward action, ready to engage the formal legal processes, protect the company's interests, and uphold the legacy that my father entrusted to me. Following the thorough review and strategic planning sessions with David Carlisle, the next critical step was to transition from preparation to formal legal action. Our initial move involved officially filing the final will with the probate court, to initiate the legal recognition of my father's testamentary wishes. Filing the will was not merely a procedural formality. It established the legal framework for the estate's administration and formally challenged any contrary claims, including those asserted by Rachel. David handled the submission meticulously, ensuring that the will, along with all pertinent trust amendments and supporting documents, were included in the probate file. This comprehensive package detailed the explicit bequest of Duffy Manufacturing shares and the ownership rights to the family home. By lodging these documents, we placed the court on clear notice about the legitimate ownership structure, setting the groundwork for judicial oversight of the estate's distribution. Simultaneously, formal legal notice disputing Rachel's claims was served to her. This notice outlined the basis of her erroneous assertions and referenced the binding legal documents that invalidated her position. It was crucial that Rachel receive this communication through official channels to both satisfy procedural requirements and signal the seriousness with which we regarded her challenge. Through this, we ensured that any further claims or actions on her part would be subject to court scrutiny, limiting informal or unilateral attempts to assert control. In parallel with probate filing, David lodged updated corporate ownership documents with the Secretary of State's office. These filings reaffirmed the official share registry, confirming my 85% ownership and the identity of the minority shareholder. This step was a strategic reinforcement of ownership clarity at the state level, preventing any ambiguity about who held legal title to the business. It also served as a deterrent against any attempts Rachel might make to manipulate or misrepresent corporate records. Recognizing the importance of maintaining confidence among Duffy Manufacturing's clients and business partners, I drafted a carefully worded communication to key stakeholders. The message was concise, professional, and transparent, informing them of the ongoing estate proceedings while emphasizing stability in company leadership and operations. I avoided disclosing contentious family details, focusing instead on reassuring clients that our contractual commitments and service standards remained unchanged. This proactive approach was essential to mitigate any risk of reputational damage or contract disruption caused by perceived instability. Concurrently, I initiated the establishment of a family trust structure designed to solidify succession planning and prevent future disputes. This trust would clearly delineate asset control and succession protocols, reducing the likelihood of ambiguities or rival claims down the line. I coordinated with David and our financial advisors to draft trust documents that were legally robust and aligned with both my father's original intent and our corporate governance framework. Throughout this period, Rachel maintained a publicly defiant stance, dismissing the weight of legal documentation and court procedures. However, unbeknownst to her, we had fortified our position with a multi-layered legal and administrative strategy. The formal filings, served notices, and stakeholder communications were all coordinated to present an unassailable front, grounded in law and corporate governance. This comprehensive approach was designed to systematically erode her credibility and legitimate standing over time. Meanwhile, I remained vigilant, monitoring any responses or actions from Rachel, while strictly channeling all communications through our legal counsel. I documented every interaction meticulously, preserving records of correspondence, notices served, and any attempted interference with company operations or estate matters. This disciplined record-keeping was crucial to uphold procedural integrity and provide evidence should further legal interventions become necessary. The probate court's acknowledgement of the will filing and the accompanying documentation marked a key procedural milestone. It signaled that the legal system was now formally engaged and that ownership matters would be adjudicated based on evidence and statutory law, not informal claims or family dynamics. This transition from private dispute to public legal process underscored the gravity of the situation and the necessity of maintaining professional composure and procedural rigor. As these legal processes unfolded, I maintained a steady focus on operational continuity within the company. Ensuring that board members and senior management understood the situation and remained aligned was critical. The company's governance structures, including shareholder protections and executive authority, provided a strong framework to resist any disruptive attempts from Rachel. Regular briefings with the board were held, emphasizing adherence to corporate bylaws and the legal realities underpinning ownership. In summary, this phase combined formal legal filings, strategic communication, and proactive governance measures, all coordinated to affirm and safeguard rightful ownership while limiting the scope of Rachel's claims. The process was methodical and multifaceted, reflecting a comprehensive defense that leveraged every legal and professional tool at my disposal. The situation remained delicate, with Rachel's defiance still a factor, but the foundation was firmly laid for systematic resolution through judicial and corporate mechanisms. Rachel's attempt to assert control over the company operations came quickly after we formally filed the will and clarified ownership status with the probate court and Secretary of State. Despite her public statements at the will reading, I anticipated she might try to leverage any informal influence or disrupt business continuity, so I had already briefed the board and senior executives on the legal realities and the company's governance provisions. This preparation proved essential when Rachel made her first move to intervene in daily operations. Within days of the filings, Rachel contacted several mid-level managers, demanding access to financial records and attempting to direct operational decisions. She also showed up unannounced at the business premises, claiming de facto authority stemming from her interpretation of the family legacy. However, the board of directors, well-informed and unified, immediately rebuffed her efforts. We invoked the corporate bylaws and shareholder agreements, which explicitly define who has authority to act on behalf of the company. Since these documents clearly listed me as CEO holding 85% of shares, Rachel's claims had no contractual or legal foundation. The board convened an emergency meeting to address Rachel's conduct. Minutes from this meeting documented a unanimous resolution to reject any unauthorized access or directives from her. The resolution cited specific sections of the shareholder agreement that prohibit minority or non-shareholding parties from interfering without explicit board approval. We also authorized the legal department to send a formal cease and desist letter, warning Rachel that further attempts to disrupt company operations would be met with legal action for breach of fiduciary duty and trespassing on corporate property. Rachel's access to corporate accounts and resources was swiftly frozen. Our finance team, under direction from the CFO and legal counsel, locked down all financial systems and banking authorizations. Any previously granted informal permissions or shared passwords were revoked. This measure was necessary to protect the company's assets from unauthorized transactions or disclosures that could jeopardize client confidentiality or financial integrity. Importantly, these actions were taken with adherence to formal corporate governance procedures. Every step, from the board meeting resolutions to communications with Rachel, was documented diligently. Board meeting minutes, email correspondences, legal notices, and internal memos were archived, creating a comprehensive record that could be presented to the court or regulatory agencies if needed. This systematic documentation reinforced the company's position that Rachel's actions were unauthorized and detrimental to operational stability. Externally, news of the dispute began to circulate among some family members and key business contacts. A few relatives expressed concern over Rachel's aggressive posture and the potential for reputational damage. I maintained a professional posture, avoiding public comment beyond a carefully crafted communication to our clients and partners, reassuring them of continuity and stability. Internally, I emphasized to my leadership team the importance of maintaining focus on performance and client service, ensuring that the family dispute did not affect operational effectiveness. Rachel's confidence visibly wavered as she encountered firm opposition, combined with the unambiguous legal documentation backing my ownership. Though she initially attempted to rally sympathy from certain employees and extended family members, the lack of any legal basis for her claims and the board's decisive actions curtailed her influence. The corporate governance framework and legal counsel created clear boundaries she could not cross without facing formal consequences. Despite her restricted access, Rachel continued to publicly challenge the ownership decisions on social media and through informal family channels. However, these statements had no bearing on the legal standing of ownership or operational control. David Carlisle advised that we maintain a posture of responding only through formal legal channels to avoid escalating the dispute unnecessarily while preserving the integrity of our position. The probate court also scheduled hearings to address objections raised by Rachel. Our legal team prepared comprehensive submissions supporting the validity of the will and the corporate ownership structure. The court proceedings added a formal judicial layer to the dispute, reinforcing that any claims needed to be substantiated by law and evidence, not family assertions or public declarations. Throughout this period, I remained composed and focused, choosing to let the weight of legal facts and corporate governance speak louder than any emotional appeals or unsupported claims. I continued to document all communications and incidents related to Rachel's attempts to interfere, ensuring a transparent and detailed record that could be leveraged if needed. This stage was critical in demonstrating that ownership and control of Duffy Manufacturing were not just matters of family legacy or verbal claims, but legally protected rights upheld by corporate law and estate planning. Rachel's initial attempts to seize control were systematically dismantled through professional governance and legal mechanisms, setting the stage for the next phase of legal resolution. While the situation remained tense, the company's operations remained stable, and the board's unified stance underscored the strength of the legal and corporate framework protecting the business. Rachel's defiance was contained but unresolved, leaving the dispute poised to advance through the judicial process with a clear demonstration of rightful ownership and governance control firmly established. The probate court's ruling in favor of the validity of the final will mark a pivotal moment in this ongoing struggle, but it was far from a conclusion. When the judge unequivocally recognized the most recent, properly executed testament as the controlling document, it legally dismissed Rachel's assertions, rooted in outdated drafts and informal family conversations. This legal endorsement validated the extensive documentation I had painstakingly compiled and reaffirmed the clarity and enforceability of my father's expressed intentions. The courtroom was tense during the ruling. Sitting quietly, I watched as the judge referenced key provisions in the will, emphasizing how it clearly and explicitly designated me as the sole recipient of 100% of Duffy Manufacturing's shares and affirmed my rights to the family home through the right of survivorship clause. The judge also noted that prior versions of the will had been superseded and revoked, highlighting the importance of relying on the most current legal instruments in estate matters. This statement struck directly at the heart of Rachel's challenge, effectively neutralizing her claim as legally unfounded. Immediately following the court's decision, the corporate board acted swiftly to reinforce this legal position with a formal public statement. This declaration reiterated the board's unanimous recognition of my ownership and management authority, citing both the court's ruling and the company's governing documents. The statement was carefully drafted by our legal team to emphasize the legitimacy of my control, while underscoring the protective measures embedded in our shareholder agreements, tools designed to prevent hostile intrusions and ensure operational stability. The board statement was distributed internally to all employees, shareholders, and key business partners. It served not only as a message of support, but also as a clear warning against any unauthorized interference. This communication detailed how the shareholder agreement's clauses regarding breach of fiduciary duty and unauthorized access would be enforced should Rachel or any other party attempt to disrupt the company's governance. The professionalism and unity demonstrated by the board helped solidify confidence among employees and external stakeholders during what could have been a destabilizing episode. Concurrently, Rachel's legal counsel initiated settlement discussions, a tactical move signaling a shift in her approach. They proposed a payout of $250,000 in exchange for her full withdrawal of claims over both the business and the family home. This offer was likely an attempt to mitigate further legal expenses and public exposure, but it came with implications I was unwilling to accept. I declined the settlement firmly on principle, standing on the legitimacy of the legal and corporate documentation that clearly established my ownership. Accepting such an offer would have implicitly legitimized her unfounded claims and set a dangerous precedent for future disputes. The court also ordered Rachel to cover $85,000 in legal fees incurred by the estate due to her frivolous claims. This judgment was not only financially impactful, but also publicly underscored the baseless nature of her challenge. The court's imposition of cost recovery served as a deterrent against similar unfounded claims in the future and sent a strong message about the seriousness with which the judiciary treats attempts to circumvent clear legal processes. In a subsequent family meeting arranged by our lawyer, David Carlyle took an authoritative role in clarifying misunderstandings surrounding the will and the company's ownership. David patiently explained the legal distinctions between drafts and executed wills, the binding nature of shareholder agreements, and the operation of survivorship clauses in property law. His clear, measured exposition helped dismantle any lingering doubt among family members about the legitimacy of my ownership and the invalidity of Rachel's assertions. This meeting was significant not only because it publicly corrected misconceptions, but also because it further isolated Rachel within the family. Several relatives who had initially been uncertain or sympathetic to her position shifted their stance after David's explanation. This realignment weakened her support network and bolstered the broader consensus around respecting the final legal documents. Throughout this stage, I maintained a composed and professional demeanor, allowing the law and documentation to speak for themselves. Every communication, court filing, and board resolution was documented meticulously to create an unassailable record of the process. This strategic discipline ensured that Rachel's attempts to portray herself as wronged lacked credibility when scrutinized against the documented facts. Rachel's defiance, once bold and public, gradually diminished under the combined pressure of legal rulings, financial penalties, and shrinking family support. However, the situation remained delicate. Her ongoing refusal to concede maintained tension within the family and introduced uncertainty around potential further legal maneuvers. This phase underscored the critical importance of proactive corporate governance and the role of legal counsel in navigating complex family disputes over business succession. The court's ruling, the board's unified stance, and David Carlyle's clarifications collectively formed a robust defense, one that relied not on emotion or hearsay, but on the power of legally binding documentation and systematic enforcement mechanisms. With Rachel's claims formally rejected and her legal position weakened, I prepared to reinforce the company's stability and move forward with confidence, fully aware that maintaining vigilance and professional rigor remained essential as this matter continued to unfold through legal and familial channels. Rachel's downward spiral through this ordeal was as much professional as personal, and I observed it unfold with a mix of detached clarity and strategic foresight. Her reputation, which until then had been relatively stable within our extended family and among local professional circles, began to deteriorate rapidly. The combination of her aggressive claims, public defiance, and the mounting legal evidence against her painted a picture that estranged her from many who had once been neutral or sympathetic. Within the family, the impact was immediate and palpable. Several relatives who had initially entertained her assertions or expressed hesitation over the will's terms started distancing themselves. The family gatherings became noticeably strained, and whispered conversations hinted at a growing consensus that Rachel's approach was reckless and damaging to familial harmony. It was a stark reminder that credibility is a fragile asset, one that legal defeats and perceived obstinacy can swiftly erode. While I refrained from engaging in family politics or debates, the shift in dynamics underscored the importance of the legal victories we were securing, not only for ownership clarity, but for preserving the company's legacy intact. Professionally, Rachel's standing suffered as well. News of the dispute subtly filtered through local business networks and informal channels, despite my efforts to keep the matter discreet. Her aggressive tactics, contacting clients attempting to assert authority without legal grounds, were seen as unprofessional and damaging. Several of her previous business acquaintances began questioning her judgment and reliability. This erosion of professional trust was exacerbated by her mounting financial difficulties, which became increasingly evident as her legal expenses ballooned. By this stage, Rachel's legal costs had already exceeded $120,000. These expenses were not trivial. They represented a significant financial burden that compounded her existing debts and worsened her precarious economic position. Her lawyer's fees, court costs, and the ordered payment of $85,000 in legal fees to cover the estate's defense created a cumulative financial pressure that threatened her stability. I understood that legal battles of this nature often take a toll well beyond the courtroom, affecting credit, personal finances, and professional prospects. As these pressures mounted, Rachel was forced to liquidate personal assets to cover immediate expenses. I became aware through indirect channels that she sold off valuable personal items and even considered refinancing or selling her home to meet financial obligations. These moves signaled a desperation that contrasted sharply with the calm, methodical approach my team and I maintained. I documented these developments carefully, not out of vindictiveness, but to maintain a clear record of the consequences tied directly to the unfounded claims and the legal process that followed. Despite this, Rachel persisted in challenging the situation publicly, though her voice grew less authoritative and more defensive. Her social media posts, once assertive, became sporadic and filled with vague complaints about unfair treatment and family betrayal. These posts, while emotional, further alienated her from professional contacts who valued discretion and reliability. The impact on her credibility was tangible. It limited her ability to forge or maintain meaningful professional relationships, which in her financial state was a critical setback. Meanwhile, the company experienced a notable resurgence in confidence among clients and partners. I communicated regularly with key stakeholders, providing assurances grounded in transparency and the demonstrated stability of our governance. 2 major contracts were renewed shortly after the court's ruling, totaling approximately $2.4 million annually. These renewals were not merely business wins, they were affirmations from the market that despite internal disputes, Duffy Manufacturing remained a reliable and professional enterprise. The contrast between my company's stable trajectory and Rachel's faltering position highlighted the effectiveness of a disciplined, evidence-based approach to governance and dispute resolution. Media coverage, though limited, began to take note of the dispute as an instructive case. Local business journals and family enterprise forums referenced the situation as a cautionary tale, underscoring the vital importance of clear estate planning and corporate governance. The narrative was less about personal conflict and more about the professional lessons gleaned, the necessity of updated wills, the protection afforded by shareholder agreements, and the risks inherent in ignoring legal realities when familial assets are involved. This external recognition further reinforced the legitimacy of my position and the prudence of our approach. Internally, I continued to emphasize to our executive team the importance of maintaining focus and professionalism. I ensured the leadership remained unified, steady, and committed to operational excellence. The company's culture, built over years, proved resilient in the face of family disputes. Documentation practices, transparent communication, and adherence to governance protocols helped buffer the organization from potential reputational damage or operational disruption. Throughout this period, my interactions with Rachel were limited and strictly professional, conducted through our respective legal counsels. Every correspondence was carefully recorded, and any attempts she made to engage directly were redirected to legal representatives. This posture was deliberate, to avoid escalation, prevent emotional entanglement, and maintain the integrity of the process. The professional and financial consequences Rachel faced served as a sobering example of how unchecked claims and disregard for legal documentation can have cascading effects. Her experience epitomized the risks families face when succession planning is neglected or contested, and highlighted the protective value of diligent record-keeping and legal compliance. While the situation was deeply personal, my focus remained on safeguarding the company's future through measured, strategic action, demonstrating that professionalism and legal rigor are indispensable when navigating complex family business disputes. As Rachel's standing diminished and her financial strain intensified, the underlying message became clear. A foundation of legal clarity and governance is not merely a formality, but a critical shield against the unpredictable dynamics of family conflicts. This phase of the dispute crystallized the importance of preparation and patience in protecting both assets and legacy, setting the stage for the subsequent resolution steps that would follow. The court's final judgments marked a significant turning point, but not one of mere formality. It was the legal validation of years of meticulous planning and steadfast governance. The probate judge formally awarded me full ownership of the family home, valued at $950,000, recognizing the right of survivorship clause embedded in the deed and trust documents. This wasn't a symbolic gesture. It was a definitive legal statement that the property legally transferred to me upon my father's passing, entirely dismissing Rachel's competing claims. Equally important was the court's confirmation of my exclusive control over Duffy Manufacturing, Inc. The ruling explicitly recognized the final will's directives and the corporate ownership records, reaffirming my 85% shareholding as the controlling interest. The judge noted that the shareholder agreement's provisions, particularly those protecting majority shareholders against hostile or unfounded claims, were valid and enforceable. This effectively shut down any attempt by Rachel to assert influence or operational control over the company. The court also ordered Rachel to reimburse $135,000 in legal fees incurred by the estate due to her frivolous and baseless claims. This financial judgment was significant beyond the monetary value. It publicly acknowledged the lack of merit in her challenge and served as a deterrent to any similar future disputes. The court's stance underscored the judiciary's intolerance for attempts to subvert clear legal documentation through emotional or unsupported arguments. Following the judicial ruling, the Duffy Manufacturing Board moved swiftly to reinforce the decision, with a formal statement circulated to all employees, shareholders, and key business partners. This declaration reiterated the company's unanimous recognition of my ownership and management authority. It referenced both the court's ruling and the existing corporate governance framework, emphasizing the legitimacy of my control. The statement also highlighted the shareholder agreement's breach of fiduciary clauses, warning that any unauthorized interference would be met with immediate legal action. This board communication played a crucial role in stabilizing internal morale and external confidence. Employees, long aware of the dispute's potential to disrupt operations, now had a clear message that governance structures were intact and the company's leadership was undisputed. Clients and suppliers, some of whom had expressed concern during the dispute's public phases, received reassurance that their contracts and relationships remained secure and professionally managed. Interestingly, Rachel's legal counsel, recognizing the untenable position after the court's ruling, initiated settlement discussions. They proposed a payment of $250,000 in exchange for her complete withdrawal of claims to both the home and the business. Their offer was likely an attempt to mitigate further legal expenses and avoid public exposure. However, I declined this offer firmly and professionally, based on principle and the clear legal standing we held. Accepting the settlement would have implicitly validated her unfounded claims and set a risky precedent for future family or corporate conflicts. The court's decision also included an order for Rachel to cover $85,000 specifically in legal fees incurred by the estate's defense, a further reinforcement of the judicial disapproval of her claims. This order not only impacted her financially, but also publicly confirmed the frivolous nature of her challenge. Such rulings emphasize how courts seek to discourage meritless litigation that wastes judicial resources and threatens corporate and familial stability. Shortly after the ruling, our family lawyer, David Carlisle, arranged a meeting with all principal family members to clarify remaining misunderstandings around the will and ownership issues. David's role was pivotal in calmly explaining the differences between earlier draft wills and the final executed document, the binding nature of shareholder agreements, and the legal effect of property rights like survivorship clauses. His clear, authoritative explanations helped dissipate lingering doubts and rumors, reinforcing the legal reality over emotional or anecdotal narratives. This meeting proved to be a turning point for family dynamics. Several relatives who had been hesitant or sympathetic to Rachel's stance shifted their support away from her once the legal facts were clearly articulated. This realignment further isolated Rachel within the family circle, weakening her social leverage and support base. The professional clarity provided by legal counsel underscored the importance of relying on formal documentation rather than hearsay or familial politics in resolving such disputes. Throughout this phase, I maintained a composed professional demeanor, letting the weight of the law and documentation speak for themselves. Every legal filing, correspondence, board resolution, and family meeting was carefully documented to create an impeccable record trail. This approach ensured that Rachel's attempts to cast herself as a victim lacked credibility when juxtaposed against the comprehensive, legally supported narrative we had established. Despite the court's ruling and dwindling family support, Rachel's defiance persisted in some quarters, creating lingering tension. However, the structural, legal, and social pressures she faced made it increasingly difficult for her to sustain any meaningful challenge. The combination of judicial decisions, corporate governance enforcement, and clear family consensus served as a formidable barrier against further escalation. This stage of the dispute reinforced the critical role that thorough estate planning, detailed corporate governance, and professional legal counsel play in protecting family businesses from internal conflict. The clear final judgments, coupled with the board's firm stance and the lawyer's educational interventions, provided a blueprint for how such disputes can be effectively managed and resolved, not through emotion or anecdote, but via disciplined adherence to law and documentation. The professional and financial consequences for Rachel were significant. Her reputation within family and local business circles suffered, undermined by the public nature of her unsuccessful claims and mounting legal expenses. The cumulative effect of these judgments and rulings sent a strong message about the risks inherent in pursuing unsupported legal challenges, particularly in the context of family enterprises. While the situation remained delicate, the court's rulings and subsequent corporate actions shifted the balance decisively. The company's operational stability was restored, client confidence reaffirmed, and the family's legal and financial uncertainties substantially reduced. I continued to monitor the situation closely, ensuring that all legal and corporate protocols were strictly followed and that the company remained insulated from any residual fallout. This phase did not mark an end, but rather a critical consolidation of legal authority and professional legitimacy, cornerstones upon which the company's future stability and growth would be built. The judgments and family realignments provided a foundation for renewed focus on business success and legacy preservation, grounded firmly in the rule of law and disciplined governance. Today, I continue to lead Duffy Manufacturing with a renewed sense of purpose and an even stronger foundation. Over the past year, we achieved a 25% increase in revenue, a milestone that reflects not just market growth, but the resilience of the company's governance and operational stability. This growth was supported by expanded equity partnerships, which I strategically negotiated to bring in investors aligned with our long-term vision and values. These partnerships were structured carefully, with new shareholder agreements that reinforced protections for majority control, while introducing fresh capital and expertise to fuel innovation and expansion. The experience taught me invaluable lessons about the necessity of proactive and comprehensive estate planning. In response to the conflict, I worked closely with legal and financial advisors to enhance our family trust and corporate governance frameworks. We revised and updated estate plans to include clearer succession protocols, buy-sell agreements, and contingency provisions designed to prevent ambiguities or disputes like the one Rachel initiated. This process involved detailed legal review and coordination with trust officers, ensuring that every document reflected the current realities and future goals of the family and the business. These enhancements provide a legally robust blueprint that protects both family interests and business continuity. Reflecting on the ordeal, I appreciate how my methodical approach, rooted in meticulous documentation and calm strategic thinking, proved crucial in navigating what could have been a destructive familial conflict. At the will reading, Rachel's confident but unfounded claim presented a moment of profound challenge. Instead of reacting impulsively, I relied on the strength of our corporate records, properly executed estate documents, and the guidance of our family lawyer, David Carlisle. This combination allowed me to systematically dismantle her assertions without engaging in personal confrontation or emotional disputes. Throughout the process, I remained committed to professionalism, understanding that maintaining an objective, evidence-based posture was essential, not only legally, but also to preserve the company's reputation and operational integrity. Every step taken was documented, whether legal filings, board resolutions, or communications with stakeholders. This discipline ensured transparency and accountability, which reassured clients, partners, and employees that the company remained stable and well-managed despite the internal challenges. The outcome reinforced a vital truth. In family business disputes, preparation and patience are indispensable. Emotional reactions or unsubstantiated claims can erode trust and damage legacies, but rigorous adherence to legal frameworks and governance structures can protect assets and relationships. By focusing on facts and law rather than emotion, I was able to uphold my father's intentions and secure the future of the company. Looking ahead, I continue to prioritize clear communication and ongoing governance improvements. We hold regular board meetings with comprehensive minutes and maintain an updated corporate record system. These practices not only meet regulatory compliance, but also serve as strategic defenses against any potential challenges. I have also invested in leadership development within the company to ensure that successors are prepared and that the business culture emphasizes professionalism and accountability. Ultimately, this experience has reaffirmed the value of strategic patience and professional rigor in business and life. The betrayal by a family member was a difficult test, but it was met with a response grounded in evidence, law, and calm resolve. This approach not only protected what I built, but strengthened the company's trajectory for sustainable success, securing my family's legacy for generations to come.